We're going to talk about closing up one end of this cylinder, or essentially putting a bottom on it. And in this discussion, I also want to address form as an element of art. Now, form has a lot of subsets, meaning there are a lot of different types of form, obviously. Some forms are considered more static, right? Like less prone to movement. Like this is a pretty static position of this. It's sitting on its flat side. If I show this to you like this, sitting this way, it's going to appear much more dynamic because it would want to be rolling. Further, there's the interior of a form, right? What does the interior of this form look like? What does the exterior of this form look like? You know, the interior form here is very similar to the exterior form. It's just this skin that's on the inside of the form. And we know what it is because we can see in there. There's also a negative form in here. If I took all that negative space in there and made it solid, it in itself is a form, right? So interior form is the skin of the inside of the form. Exterior form is the skin on the outside of the form. Negative form would be a form that the negative space takes up, right? It's obviously the negative form is informed by this interior form. But that could be different than what's on the outside. Here, it tends to be the same, right? Because it's just a thin slab that we made this out of. Now, to put a base on this, I have some slab left over from making the actual cylinder, and I have enough that I can close one end of this form up. I'm going to show you the best way to do that. This is the best way that I learned how to do it. There's obviously more than one way to do things, but remember, I'm going to show you the best way to do something. It might be more work in your eyes, or it may not be ideal for you, but this is the best way that I have learned how to do this. So first you put some slip upon your cylinder. Now remember, everything is kind of a wet leather hard, all right? Then you can take your slab that you're going to put there and just gently place it upon that slip. And then I like to lift it off. And now I know where I need to slip and score everything. So I'm going to put some more slip here. And then I'm going to kind of do some more slip on that circle that I got from setting the slab upon the cylinder. Okay, so I've got slip in all areas. And so, of course, now my duty is to score thoroughly both this slab that's going to be attached to my cylinder and the top edge of this cylinder. And this is important. And the more time you take to do it and the neater you do it, the less you'll have to clean up on the inside, especially if you want this to be a cup. Some of you, though, these items are not necessarily going to be functional. Maybe you close both ends. If you close both ends, do you really know what the interior form is? You don't, you know, as a viewer. So there's lots of different things that you can do when working with a cylinder. All right, so I'm going to take this and I'm just going to peek through here and make sure it lines up well. And then I'm going to gently kind of push down. And I'm going to kind of bend the clay over that edge of that cylinder, and then I'm going to bend it back, kind of bending it back and forth. This is after I've pushed down kind of firm. Now, if I start a rip, I can gently kind of rip this slab away, and that kind of brings the material over. And it's not necessarily really neat and clean looking right away, although it can be if you do it right, but it has this way of not looking like it's touched too much. Whereas sometimes when you add a bottom to something, it looks like you've added a bottom, and it doesn't look like the bottom's actually part of the thing. So you'll still see a seam there, but it has kind of a cohesive look with the rest. And I can come back and clean some of that up, some of those like chunkier looks. The other thing you can do after you do that is drop it a bit to make sure those slipping and scoring is really pushed into itself nicely. If I want to clean up this edge, I can just slowly start working around there. You just want to be careful in terms of over touching it. You don't want to make a thin spot. Remember, if you're working a seam to the point where it gets thin, You're overworking the seam. All right, so that's putting a bottom or an end on a cylinder. Remember, I could do both if I wanted to, and then it would look like a solid form almost, maybe, okay? All right.